Kayla walked through the frozen highlands of Arendor, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, the wind biting at her skin. Snowflakes danced in the air like fragile whispers, settling on her dark hair and armored shoulders. Her heart pounded with both hope and fear. Today she would approach her mate. Today she believed her life could finally find meaning. Her mate, a young but proud warrior named Thailand, waited at the edge of the icebound cliffs, overlooking the valley below. Kayla's boots crunched against the frost as she drew closer, each step echoing in the cold silence. She had trained for years, faced countless dangers, and endured harsh winters, all to earn a place at his side. She believed in the bond they shared, in the strength of their connection. But the moment she spoke, her heart shattered. "You are too old, Kayla," Thailand said, his voice cold and final. "Too old to bear pups, too old to matter in the clan's future." Kayla's breath caught. She had expected doubt, perhaps hesitation, but never cruelty so sharp, so deliberate. The wind seemed to still around her, as if even nature recoiled from his words. Her chest tightened, her pride warring with the pain that tore through her. What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling but refusing to break completely. "I mean what I say," Thalen replied. "I need strength that will last generations. You are past that, you are done." The words struck her like arrows. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand justice. But she knew the rules of the clans. To oppose him openly would bring shame, not honor. She turned, swallowing her tears, forcing herself to walk away. Each step was heavy, each heartbeat a drum of betrayal. Kayla wandered into the cursed forest that stretched beyond the cliffs. Twisted trees, their branches like skeletal fingers, loomed over her. Shadows moved with intent, whispering secrets she could not fully understand. The forest was old, older than any living soul, and it held stories of warriors and kings, of betrayal and power, of curses that could not be broken. She pressed on, the cold seeping into her bones. Thoughts of Thalen tormented her, but beneath the hurt a spark of determination remained. She would survive. She would not let his rejection define her. If the clan saw her as worthless, she would find value elsewhere, even if it meant walking into the unknown. Night fell quickly in the highlands, the moon rising like a pale sentinel over the snow. Kayla found herself on a ridge, the wind whipping around her as she gazed down at the valley. That's when she saw him. Arion, the Alpha King, stood tall on a distant hill. Legend spoke of him in hushed tones, a ruler feared and desired, a warrior who had never been defeated, a man whose power seemed to flow like fire through the land. His presence was undeniable. Even from a distance, Kayla felt it pull at her, both terrifying and exhilarating. He watched her, his eyes sharp and knowing, as though he could see every fear, every pain, every unspoken longing she carried. Kayla felt exposed and yet strangely safe. "You walk as though the world has abandoned you," his voice rumbled, deep and steady, reaching her ears even across the snow. Kayla hesitated. "Perhaps it has," she said softly, though her heart beat wildly. "Perhaps it has not," he replied. "Perhaps it only waits for the brave to claim it." His words were a challenge and an invitation all at once. Kayla's mind raced. Could she trust this man, a king whose name alone commanded fear? Yet something in his gaze told her he understood her pain. He saw her not as rejected, but as resilient. Arion stepped closer, and the snow seemed to part around him as though the land itself acknowledged his power. "You carry fire in your soul, Kayla. Few survive what you have endured and remain unbroken. Few would still walk alone in the frozen night." Kayla met his eyes, and for the first time since Thalen's rejection, she felt a flicker of hope. She did not know this man, yet somehow she felt that in his presence she could rise above her shame and sorrow. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice betrayed a trace of doubt. "I will survive." Arion's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Survival is not enough for one such as you. You are meant for more, and I may offer it." Kayla's heart skipped. "And what is that?" "To stand at my side, not as a servant, not as someone to be claimed by fear, but as a consort, a warrior of equal strength. You were rejected before, yes, but sometimes what is lost leads to what is destined." Kayla's mind spun. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to hope again? The promise was intoxicating, but it carried risk. Aligning with the Alpha King meant stepping into a world of power, politics and danger beyond anything she had faced. Suddenly, a howl shattered the night, sharp and terrifying. Kayla turned to see shadowy figures moving through the forest. A rival clan hunting her, drawn by rumors of her vulnerability. Panic surged in her chest, but Arian was already there. In a single, fluid motion, he drew his blade, standing between her and the oncoming danger. The clash was swift and brutal. Arian moved like a shadow and a storm combined, cutting down threats with precision. Kayla watched, awe and fear mingling in her chest as he defended her with unmatched skill. Every strike, every movement spoke of power, authority, and an undeniable claim. She realized then that this man was not only powerful, but relentless in his protection. When the last of the hunters fell, silence returned. Snow swirled around them, covering the ground with a fragile white veil. Kayla's heart pounded not just from fear, but from something deeper: admiration, awe, and a spark of longing she could not deny. Arian sheathed his blade and turned to her, his eyes burning with intensity. "You are stronger than they know, stronger than they think, and stronger than you believe yourself." Kayla swallowed, words failing her. She had been broken, called unworthy, rejected in the harshest way possible. And yet here was a man who saw her strength, who recognized her fire. "Will you come with me?" he asked, his voice low, almost tender, yet carrying the weight of command. "Or will you walk alone into the night, carrying only the ghosts of those who failed you?" Kayla's heart wavered. The choice was terrifying. To trust him was to step into a world she barely understood. But to walk away was to return to loneliness, to despair, to the hollow echo of rejection. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that she might be more than what Thalen had declared her to be. The wind carried her thoughts like leaves on a storm, twisting and turning, yet settling on a single truth. She would not let fear control her. "I will come," she said finally, her voice steady, but not as someone who submits. "I walk beside you as I am, strong, unbroken, and not afraid to face what comes." Arian's eyes softened and a small smile curved his lips. "Good," he said. "The world has much to test us, Kayla, and the night is long. But together, we may just endure." The snow fell heavier, covering their tracks as they began the trek toward his fortress, a dark citadel that rose like a shadow against the moonlit sky. Kayla felt the weight of the unknown pressing around her, yet she did not falter. For the first time she realized that rejection was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. But even as they moved forward, distant howls echoed across the highlands, reminders that danger was never far, and that the path they had chosen was filled with shadows yet to come. Kayla's heart raced, her pulse a drum of anticipation, fear, and a longing she could not yet name. The night had claimed her once. Now it seemed it would demand more than courage. It would demand transformation, and Kayla was ready to answer. Kayla followed Arian through the snow-laden paths that led to his fortress. The citadel rose like a dark sentinel against the night sky, its towers crowned with frost and shadow. Despite its ominous presence, Kayla felt a strange sense of safety walking beside him. Each step she took beside the Alpha King seemed to strengthen her own courage, though the weight of the past still clung to her like ice on her skin. Inside the fortress, warmth from burning torches met the chill, and the walls were etched with runes that whispered of ancient power. Arian moved with effortless authority, his presence commanding the attention of all who lingered in the halls. Kayla could sense the respect and even fear that rippled through the servants and warriors. Yet no one dared approach her with anything but deference. It was the first time in her life that she felt seen, not as a rejected woman, not as someone too old or unworthy, but as someone of importance. Arian led her to a hall high above the fortress, where windows opened to the night sky, and the moonlight bathed the space in silver. He paused and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Kayla," he said softly, "the world is not kind to those who are alone. Rejection is a wound, yes, but it is not the end. It can be the beginning of strength and of recognition, if you choose to claim it." Kayla felt the words stir something deep within her. She had carried shame, anger, and grief, but for the first time she considered the possibility that her worth was not determined by another's judgment. She looked into his eyes and saw not only power but understanding, a reflection of her own resilience. Their days in the fortress were filled with rigorous training and careful observation. Arion tested her in both mind and body, pushing her limits and forcing her to confront her fears. Kayla, who had once believed herself weak, found strength she had never known. She learned the subtleties of strategy, the patience required for power, and the courage that came from standing tall in the face of danger. Yet, the shadow of her past followed her. Thalen, the mate who had rejected her, had not forgotten her either. Rumors reached the fortress that he was rallying a rival clan, seeking revenge for what he believed was his lost claim. Kayla's heart quickened at the thought, but she no longer trembled as she once had. She was no longer a frightened girl in the snow. She was a warrior tempered by rejection and refined by Arion's guidance. One evening, as the wind howled outside, Kayla stood on the balcony of the fortress, gazing at the moonlit highlands. Arion joined her silently, his presence steady and comforting. "They come for you," he said without turning. "But you are no longer alone, and neither am I." Kayla clenched her fists, the cold biting through her gloves. "I was called too old, worthless, forgotten. If they come, I will not run. I will stand." Arion placed a hand on her shoulder. "And I will stand with you," he said. His voice carried a weight that was both promise and warning. But strength is not just in muscle or blade. It is in the courage to face what you fear most, including yourself. Kayla met his gaze, and in that moment, something shifted. The anger, the sorrow, the self-doubt, they began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce determination. She realized that rejection had not ended her story. It had prepared her for something far greater. As the first light of dawn broke, a messenger arrived with news. Thalen and his allies were approaching, determined to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Kayla's pulse quickened, but not with fear. With Arion at her side, she felt an unshakable confidence. Together they would face the threat, and Kayla knew she would not falter. The battle was swift and intense. Snow churned beneath their feet as rival warriors clashed with the defenders of the fortress. Arion moved with precision, protecting Kayla while allowing her to strike with skill and authority. She realized in the heat of combat that she was no longer the rejected girl. She was a force to be reckoned with, strong, capable, and respected. In the midst of the fight, Thalen confronted her, his eyes full of arrogance and disbelief. "Kayla, you will regret defying me!" he shouted, charging at her with fury. Kayla faced him without hesitation. She did not strike out of revenge, but with clarity and purpose. "I am not yours to claim," she said, her voice steady. "I belong to no one who cannot see my worth." Thalen faltered, stunned by her defiance. Before he could recover, Arion intervened, disarming him with ease. The former mate, who had once held power over her heart, now lay defeated not by anger, but by the strength Kayla had cultivated and the protection of the Alpha King who had chosen her. After the battle, Kayla and Arion stood together atop the fortress walls, gazing out over the snow-covered highlands. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of victory and the promise of a new beginning. Kayla felt a calm she had never known, a balance between strength and vulnerability, power and trust. "You have changed," Arion said softly, his hand brushing hers in a rare gesture of tenderness. "You were always strong, Kayla, but now the world sees it as I do." Kayla looked at him, her eyes reflecting both the moonlight and the warmth that had begun to grow in her heart. "I was broken," she admitted quietly, "but not defeated. Not anymore, and I trust you." Arion's gaze softened, and he nodded. "Then we walk forward together as equals. You will never be alone again." The fortress, once a place of shadows and whispers, now felt alive with potential. Kayla knew there would be challenges ahead, other clans, other threats, the lingering power of old curses. But she also knew that with Arion at her side, she could face them all. As the night deepened, the highlands echoed with distant howls, reminders that the world was not yet tamed. But Kayla no longer feared the unknown. She had faced rejection, survived betrayal, and found strength in the fire of her own spirit. Now she would walk beside the Alpha King, not as a follower, but as a partner, equal in power, courage, and destiny. Their bond was no longer one of pity or rescue. It was forged in shared trials, in the acknowledgement of pain and strength, in the choice to stand together against a world that had once tried to cast her aside. Kayla lifted her eyes to the sky, the stars bright and unwavering above the frozen land. "This is only the beginning. she whispered. Arian's hand found hers, his grip firm and unyielding. "And we will meet every beginning together," he replied. The fortress stood silent around them, its ancient stones holding stories of kings and warriors long gone. But tonight a new story was born, one of redemption, of reclaimed power, and of a bond that could not be broken by fear or rejection. As they stood together, snow falling softly around them, Kayla felt the last remnants of doubt slip away. She had been rejected once, called unworthy, and told her time had passed. But now, in the presence of the Alpha King, she understood that true worth was never given by others. It was claimed, embraced and strengthened through courage, resilience, and the choice to rise, and Kayla had risen.